Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Toby, tell us the story of what got you into leadership and organizational consulting.
So I think it was born out of probably a bit born out of frustration and lived experience. So a big chunk of my my story has been in-house. I had a couple of kind of exec roles, scaling companies. I'm probably experiencing the challenges of wrestling with how do you bring strategy, really good operating process, and good leadership together so that we're building some sense of coherency. But probably, it's probably more having experience being in a mess rather than coming from being a career consultant and being part of getting it wrong sometimes, but beginning to figure out not the complete formula, because I'd never want to suggest that I have, but I suppose beginning to figure out some of the stuff that might make organizations both more highly performant in terms of the results, but also a great place for people to spend the majority of their waking hours in. So it's been born out of operational practice, and I got to a time about 4 years ago where I think I felt like my time in-house at exec level was probably about done, and wanted to have a go at start my own business and supporting as many leaders and organizations as we could, not have to pay the same stupid tax that I certainly had to pay in previous roles.
So what's the number one problem that you're solving right now? Like what's the outcome of working with you now?
So at a high level, I would say it's a lack of coherence. Now, that's not what anybody is walking around thinking, I've got a problem of coherence. But what I mean by that is often strategy, i.e. the direction that a company is going in, the operating process that translates strategy into work actually happening, and the behaviors of leaders are often not particularly well joined up together. And often the way that organizations try and solve for those things is in separation. So we let HR or some kind of training company work with our leaders. We might work with somebody else around strategy. But the problem is it still fundamentally doesn't design an organization as a coherent system. And so leaders that we work with are experiencing, they're busy, not aligned. They kind of end up working harder to try and cover up for the lack of alignment. The strategy maybe is getting broader as the desire to try and capture more market is rising. The culture probably is aspirational, but not operational. The processes are not reinforcing the right behavior. So we basically got people pedaling faster, but not really moving a great deal quicker. And it would certainly be our experience and position that that's because we don't have coherence across the organization as a designed system, as an integrated, holistic system that brings together behavior, brings together operating process and clear direction that's enforced by clear choice that is both what are we doing and what are we not doing. So that's broadly the space that we operate in and the kind of problems that we help predominantly scale up organizations solve.
Talk to me like I'm the CEO here. Okay, I have a lack of coherence.
Yep.
How is that helping me get more clients, make my clients worth more, or decreasing my risks?
So typically it shows up. I mean, I would try and boil it down as practically as I could do and ask the question about whether or not leaders up and down the organization can the CEO be specific about behaviors that if their leaders were doing more of would make them more more money and be more successful. So whether or not that's in your revenue organization, are there behaviors that you know people are not doing or they are doing that they need to stop that is preventing the company from moving quicker in the direction that it's wanting to move? And I don't know many CEOs that I've spent time with who would consistently say that they look at their organization and their leaders are doing the things that they want them to do. And that is because they don't have strategy, process, and clearly defined behaviors that they know how to scale. And the consequent behavior to that is that either your executive team begin to collapse down into the organization, so they lose their altitude level, they get busier and busier doing more of the work further down the organization because they're not trusting that the right things are being done day to day at a functional level. And so the executive team begins to collapse down into the extended or VP level part of the organization, which means they're spending less time strategically driving the business. They're too tactical, they're in the weeds too much, which actually ends up pushing your VP level down further into the organization, and so on and so forth. Most CEOs, when you begin to open that conversation, fully understand that reality. They fully understand that their exec team are not operating at the level that they want to, that they're observing critical behaviors across the organization that are not driving execution. I would say it's typically not always a lack of clarity on direction. It's normally a lack of clarity and consistency in execution that tends to be the issue, which is often where we end up entering our support. So I would press on that until a CEO is saying, yes, I think that feels about right. What can you do to help?
Do you have a specific industry, niche, company size that you typically work with on coherence? Like how do you decide who you work with?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do work with a broader client spectrum than our target would be, but 70% of our clients are 25 to 200 million turnover, between 206 to 700 staff. A lot of them are kind of PE-backed, growth-focused, scale-up organizations. That would be the prevailing kind of target client for us, because we both operationally, we've got experience leading in those organizations, so we understand it very well. In terms of industry, again, the majority of our clients at the moment are tech orientated, but not exclusively. So we do a bunch in fintech, particularly some are pure tech-based organizations. But again, we do have clients outside of that because the fundamental issues are pretty similar. Like we do, you could boil down what we do to just be purely at a team level, right? Teams are still dealing with clear strategy, clear operating process, and clear leadership behaviors. So inside of some slightly wider, bigger corporate environments, we sometimes work just with an executive team or business line leadership team.
So, to my favorite part of this podcast, usually.
Let's see.
How do you market coherence? Like, how do you brand? How do you get the CEOs, those leaders come to you, Toby, and be like, I really have a problem of coherence right now, and I need to pay a reasonably high amount of money to solve it. Like, how do you market? How do you brand? How do you get people not only to be interested, but to knock on the door and be like, this could be for me? Yeah.
So there's probably two sides to that conversation. I think one is clearly it's a relational sell. Consulting on high priced projects, people don't drop hundreds of thousands without having a meaningful level of connection. And because of the size organization that we typically work with, you're working disproportionately with founders and CEOs. And so It's a relational sell, which is therefore means that it's slow burn, but it's a relational referral-led process primarily. I would say referral and reputation-led sale, because I don't know many people who would spend that amount of money, particularly when you're not one of the big four, or where the brand walks through the door before you do. That you don't need to be credible, and you don't need to build some kind of relational leverage with that individual. So our core, I would still say 70 to 80% of our clients are referral led, which basically means our clients love what we do and they introduce us to people. That's not an entirely accidental process. Some of that is obviously in a intelligent way is encouraged. We sit down with our clients. Obviously, we will internally share best practice across clients, so we keep seeding the sorts of work that we're doing. But equally, sometimes it's simply about sitting down and saying, we've loved working with you. We know that we've added value. You do. Are there other people who are like you that you could introduce us to? And I think as long as that's done in a sophisticated way, not a kind of really, kind of tacky and grubby way, then I've always found that to be, and as long as you're not constantly asking, then honestly, 70 to 80% of our business comes in that direction. I think there's then a second element to what we do, which is, I would say, it is more simply about building brand integrity and brand thought leadership. So we write and we will speak in certain environments. So I probably speak at some kind of event on at least every month. We will do occasional podcasts. We do our own monthly webinars, which is not primarily about just trying to drive. I don't see that as we'll run a webinar and suddenly we'll have a load of inbound. It's actually about establishing intellectual credibility for what it is that we're about. And so we work quite hard and increasingly work hard at an intellectual position so that people know what we stand for and what we don't, because otherwise I think that kind of more indirect marketing is just noise. There's so much stuff out there that unless you've got a clear position and a robust intellectual position that has credibility from the case studies that you've got, you've really very little point doing it, because I don't believe, particularly the audience that we want to anchor ourselves with, are ever likely to buy simply because they've seen an interesting article on LinkedIn. But it gives social proof and brand integrity to what it is that we're doing. So very relational. The final thing that we do is we have something called Tillon House, which is our executive membership community. So it's an intentional community of people. It's not just like a networking event. There's a time and a place for that, but it's not congruent with the brand that we want to build. And so we have a group of, at the moment, 30 CEOs. Some of them, well, probably 50% of them are current or kind of clients that we have worked with, who just appreciate what it is that we've done. They see value in it, and they actually want other touch points with what it is that we're doing. So we gather those on a quarterly basis. Good meal, good structured, curated conversations. It's also a context where, prospects or people that we've met. My first point of call with anybody that I've met who is expressing any kind of interest in us would be, come along to one of our dinners. You're way better talking to people that we've worked with. You'll probably learn some stuff about a shared journey, but I'm a lot less interested in just trying to sell something to you. I'd much rather you talk with people who have worked with us, come to an event, get a sense of who we are and what we're about, and then we can explore further if that's relevant or useful.
This sounds like a very robust marketing funnel. I want to double down on a few things here, Toby, because you've given us so much, first of all. So thank you very much for this. I want to come back on, you're not going to get the clients from posting an article on LinkedIn. I couldn't agree more on this. Although it could be necessary in your marketing mix to have those articles on LinkedIn.
Sure.
The thing is, so many B2B coaching and consulting firm owners, when they start getting into content, thought leadership marketing, they are thinking, yeah, sure, we're going to do LinkedIn. And by we're going to do LinkedIn, they just mean we're going to post some stuff that we think are good on LinkedIn. That's it. And 6 months down the line, we are surprised on why we didn't even get a single phone call. When you think about the fund for a consulting firm, obviously nothing happens, right, if people don't know you exist. So brand awareness, knowing that people knowing that you exist is going to be necessary. But then there are so many things that we need to bear in mind. Are they problem aware? And not just the consequence of the problem, but the root cause, so that they can solve it and become solution aware. Hey, it might be, a coherence problem. Solution aware, then do they consider you as an authority? Like when you tell them, hey, you should do this, are they going to comply? Do they trust you? Have you helped other people like them facing the same problem, solve that very problem? Is the pain that they are going through bigger than the discomfort of exploring change, in which case they book a call? Consulting firm owners will start posting on LinkedIn and thinking that this is the whole marketing mix. It is not. It is the brand awareness. Like, this is a piece of the puzzle, but you still need to solve for all the other ones, which is going to lead to people booking calls with you and eventually buying from you. I love what you said around the community, the dinners, the events. Tell me more about this. Like, why community dinners, events? How do you organize that in a way that positions you as the central piece organizing all this and potentially bringing business as well? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because I would say it's, you absolutely have to sweat the detail of your positioning. And what that means is everything from venue, i.e., what does this venue tell everybody who comes about who we are? So is there anything about this? Like, I know consulting firms that kind of use client offices to host things with other people. Maybe for me, but for number one, that skews you towards overly identifying with a particular client. It makes them more the host than you. It also feels cheap. And so we use the best venues in London that we can find. So it feels exclusive. I want even some of the kind of successful CEOs that we work with to go and have an experience at some of the best locations in London that they could possibly have. I want them to walk out and say, that was the best food that I've had in the last 6 months. I want all of those things because the detail matters, because all of those things reflect towards your brand. So sweat the details, sweat the venue, sweat who's in the room. If you get the wrong people in the room, if you even get 2 or 3 people who are wrong in the room, it compresses the brand. It diminishes who you are. So you anchor on quality. Like I am pitching for and working with CEOs. Anything that feels lower than that in the room diminishes the brand. So the curation of the space, the curation of the people, the way in which you're communicating before, at the event, after the event, what level of intellect are you communicating with people? What's the texture you want? How relational do you want it to feel? So I want to create a space that is like we've got a few, I slightly joke that it's, with Chatham House rules, we call them Tillon House rules, and we've only really got a couple of them. One is that we're not showing up with our LinkedIn self. We're showing up as real leaders talking about real stuff. I don't want anybody coming in there, and I'm really clear with people who's just trying to impress people there. Like, that has no value in a real community. That's what you do in networking. You go and you show off your best self. Leaders who are CEOs in those environments often don't have authentic, real spaces. And so we fight for an honesty in the conversations. And rule number 2 is there's no selling. There's not even selling from us. So nobody sells to anybody in the room. And if we hear of that happening, we just wouldn't invite people, because it cheapens the space. So if you're building community, which is what we want to do, it's about establishing the conditions that represent your brand and about thinking of the culture that you're trying to create. And you're intentional about the details that promote that kind of environment. And then we build from that, right? So literally at the last one that we had kind of 4 weeks ago, I kind of walked into a conversation where one of the leaders was selling us to one of the other leaders. I didn't have to engineer that, and I never would be positioning ourselves. But it begins to happen very organically if you facilitated the right space. So thoughtful, and even in terms of the content, it's simple, thoughtful, reflective questions that are not making us, like, I don't want to show up and feel like I'm pointing stuff towards me. That is not classy. You're making every individual in that room the hero, and you're just curating a space. And by doing that, you get associated value. So we're simply there to serve a group of people and help them to become brilliant. That's the job. And unless we are sincere and really do that, we cheapen it every single time. And so all we're now doing is beginning to build in both directions from that community. So we're doing a leadership expedition, trekking in the Himalayas for 7 days, an immersive kind of deep experience. We're taking half a dozen of them. We're not charging from that. It's at cost, because what I know is if I can get 6 people on a trek, which we have, and I can lead them through an immersive transformational experience, we've got them for life, because they'll associate their transformation with an experience with us. And then we're building in the other direction by hosting an annual Tillon house. We're doing the first one, so let me not get ahead of ourselves. This summer, a summer Tillon house party, where we're asking that group of execs to all invite a +1 or +2, so that we get more like 50 people in the room. And so that creates our growth fringe around a core community. So we're building depth, but very gradually building breadth through high quality relational introduction. Yeah, there's a few thoughts on it.
Preach. I don't usually do this, and I'm not going to name the name of it. We have a community ourselves, about 100 high-ticket B2B coaching and consulting firm owners. Let me read you the first 2 rules and community guidelines. Number 1 rule is value first, no promo. You share questions, case studies, tutorials, thoughts, conversations, openers. No DM me for or comment XYZ to get whatever. Yeah. No linking to your own community, YouTube videos, website, lead magnets. If people want value from you because they got so much from the posts and the interactions with you, they will come to you. Yeah. Enforced cleanup. Yeah. I think what you just broke down here, Toby, it's the first time I get the opportunity to talk about it on the show, so that's why I'm leaning into it. I think in a day and age where anybody can claim anything on the internet, everybody's a thought leader, everybody has something to sell. Going back to base with like, hey, come hang out with your peers. And we're gonna enforce nobody selling to you. Like it's terrible that this has to become a marketing, like a marketing messaging. Like you come here, you're not gonna be sold to. But it's so needed because everywhere, every time we are bombarded by messages. So I love that. I think you're nailing it. If you let the people do the talking for you on top of that, then you sell, and that's the direct, or should I call it indirect ROI for you. Yeah. Amen. All makes so much sense.
100%. I think it's a far more assured, it's a more assured and confident position to do that, because there's a lot of the kind of selling that I think diminishes people's brand. It doesn't actually enhance it. And so being thoughtful and really deliberate about A, the kind of thinking that you put out there, but then B, the kind of relational center that you're building, because you're right, that is something that is becoming more valuable, not less valuable in the world that we live in. And so beginning to curate genuine, authentic leadership community has got a significant value, and probably an enhanced value more than it ever has done.
Okay, I'm spending a bit of time on this, but I think this is so good that this will be valuable for the people listening to us. I'm gonna play the devil's advocate a bit, Toby, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Hey, I'm already knees deep into all my clients' delivery. I have those proposals to work on. My team is already stretched. Hello, consulting. Sounds like a lot of work. I mean, I'm not an event organizer. How much time should I expect to get an ROI from this? Like, you know, how do you make that work? Why should I bother with this as a consulting firm owner is making $1, $2, $5, $10 million a year? Why should I go through all the hassle, of organizing my own events?
Well, first of all, you don't need to. If you don't want to,
Perfect. Next questions.
if you're being, if you're being successful building what you're building, that's great. For me, I am looking at what I'm building and what the team is building more like a platform that creates different places for people to step into, to engage with the thought position that we have. And so for me, that has multiple different engagement points. You've obviously got the consulting work that you do directly. That's the credit. It's the credentializing of your thought practice. Is you've got a point of view, you've got clients that have experienced that point of view, and it's had X effect. That's great. It's a very, very narrow environment, that, because even a 5-10 million consultancy still doesn't have loads of clients. It's because it's a high bar entry in terms of sale. I'm looking at what we're building as more like an ecosystem. So yes, we've got consulting, we've got Tillon House, that's our core community that builds longevity. And honestly, by the time, I think it was about a third of our revenue was generated through referrals that came from Tillon House over the last 12 months. So I see the commercial return, but it's not only the commercial return for me. It's actually about anchoring our thought position in a community of leaders that gives me another channel to invite people into. I might meet somebody who is not ready remotely for a consulting engagement, but I've still got a community I can invite them into, so that when they're at the point where they need it, I'm the most obvious person that they'll come to, because they're already connected, not just in a sales coffee, but in a community that they feel a sense of connection to. And then the third thing is, we're really just beginning on this, is something that we call Tillon Labs, which is our research element of the business. So in order to continue to build intellectual depth in what we're doing, and quite frankly, value in the business, there's not loads of value that comes from a consulting business alone. If you want to sell, maybe if you've got loads of multi-year contracts, maybe if you've got a very, very specific niche, you may get 1 to 1.5 valuation if you're lucky. The thing that unlocks valuation are other elements of what you're doing. And for us, building a community, and particularly beginning to build a very precise data and insight research wing of what we're doing, that's where the value is. You get a way bigger multiple on that. And so we then see that the community becomes a qualitative source of data and insight, because we've immediately got connection with an ever-growing group of senior practitioners, which all of these things begin to relate to each other. We've got a community that we can bring data and insight into. We've got a community that drives consulting revenue, and we've got data and insight that drives more credibility to our consulting offer. So they become we're building an ecosystem across the business, not just delivering consulting projects, because that is exhausting if you're just on that treadmill alone. So we're trying to build an ecosystem that may not be for everybody, but that's the position that we're in. Does it take time? Yes, it does take time to get going. I'd say the front end of getting momentum into community, it is a bit of hard work. It gets easier when the community builds a life of its own.
And that is most certainly the hard part. But once you get it, it just compounds on itself.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
Let me throw a little bit of a curveball at you, Toby, because I'm enthusiastic about this stuff, you've been flying through this interview and you've had it a bit easy. What's your number one challenge? What's the one nut that you're trying to crack that once you crack, you're gonna take the whole beast to the next level? What would that be for you?
I think it's quite honestly, it's a couple of challenges on scale. And so I think the biggest challenge for me personally at the moment is how we codify the core elements of our IP, because there's still far too much in my head than there is even across the team. And we're growing, not rapidly, but we're growing. We've grown, top line is 45% in the last 12 months. It was about 35% 12 months before. So the team is growing. And that pace has obviously, as it does with everybody, it draws you to become more operational. It doesn't allow you to do the things that ultimately position you for scale. And so the tension and the challenge that I think we are living in is, how do we actually codify so that we can multiply the core IP of the business? Because I don't really want us to be a consulting practice that has 75 different service offers. Like I want us to be a consulting practice that does a couple of things extraordinarily well and has learned how to replicate that capability inside of our team and then inside of our clients that we work with. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge, because it's a challenge of time. And just at a personal level, I probably much prefer to be just going about doing stuff rather than actually trying to go through a fairly disciplined process of extracting a load of stuff that's in my head that is an unconscious competency, and begin to go through a slightly painful conscious competency process and getting it mapped out. So I think I'd say that's one of the challenges that would probably say that's the number one challenge. And I think related to that, it's not related. I think the related challenge, which points to something I've just talked about, is wrestling with how we build the hard edges around the new work that we're doing around data insight and research in an AI assisted world. So we're convinced that there is a place and a space for high quality, both qualitative and quantitative research that is fired at the most pressing problems that organizations are facing. And so how do we not only build the hard edges around what we're focused on, but how then do we begin to surface and monetize that? I think is the intellectual challenge that we're wrestling with at the moment.
Well, if you manage to fix all of those challenges, Toby, I'd love to have you back on the show to explain us how you did. Toby Bassford, ladies and gentlemen. Toby, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
LinkedIn obviously is a good place. I think I'm about the only Toby Bassford, or you can obviously look at our website, which is just www.tillon.co.co.
We'll put all the links in the description. For what I'm concerned, I can say for sure that you gave at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview, Toby. Me, I just added you. Thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.